Change my view. Trans women, transitioned post-puberty, shouldn't be allowed in women's sports. From all that I have read and watched, I do feel they have a clear unfair advantage, especially in explosive sports like combat sports and weightlifting, and a mild advantage in other sports like running. In all things outside sports, I do think there shouldn't be such an issue, like using washrooms, etc. This is not an attack on them being women. They are. There is no denying that. And I support every trans woman who wants to be accepted as a woman. I think we have enough data to suggest that puberty affects bone density, muscle mass, fast twitch muscles, etc. Hence, the unfair advantage. Even if they are suppressing their current levels of testosterone, I think it can't neutralize the changes that occurred during puberty, can they? Would love to know how this works. Thanks. Edit. Turns out I was unaware about a lot of scientific data on this topic. I also hadn't searched the previous Reddit threads on this topic too. Some of the arguments and research articles did help me change my mind on this subject. What I am sure of as of now is that we need more research on this and letting them play is reasonable. Outright banning them from women's sports is not a solution. Maybe, in some sports or in some cases there could be some restrictions placed. But it would be more case-to-case basis than a general ban. From all that I have read and watched, I do feel they have a clear unfair advantage, especially in explosive sports like combat sports and weightlifting, and a mild advantage in other sports like running. Can you cite some examples? Given you mentioned combat sports, I assume you are talking about Fallon Fox, who was the most infamous name when she competed in women's MMA. This issue with this example is when you dig into the facts it doesn't support your claim. Fallon Fox was training to attempt to make a higher level and like every up and comer fought low skilled, bad record opponents to pad her record. This is how MMA works, and boxing. Fallon was undefeated by beating up low level opposition. Fallon then stepped up into what I would call middle tier opposition and was promptly TKO'd. She went on to win 2 fights after that against not very good opposition and left MMA. Let's talk about the opponent she got TKO'd by. Ashley Evans Smith was 1-0 as a pro when she beat Fallon Fox and 5-4 as an amateur. Not exactly a world beater. After beating Fallon she gained a bit of a name, and after one more win, she made the UFC. In the UFC she has a record of 3-4 and is not a high level contender. Point being, Fallon was never a high level competitor in MMA and lost to the only decent opposition she faced. Fallon did compete in grappling as well and she was not exactly a world beater there either. It seems to me that there is an asymmetry going on. When a transgender athlete wins, it is evidence that their participation is unfair, but when one loses, it is not evidence to the contrary. Even if they are suppressing their current levels of testosterone, I think it can't neutralize the changes that occurred during puberty, can they? Would love to know how this works. Others have already linked some studies regarding the effects of HRT, but some of the advantages you mention are disputable as advantages and others that would be an advantage also track across race. My question would be, if the advantage is okay to exist across race, why is it so unfair when it is a trans athlete? For example, I am not sure bone density is necessarily an advantage, and it certainly is not in some sports. There is also evidence to suggest that the HRT over a long term does impact bone density, but ignoring all that, bone density is quite different across race as well. Also, trans athletes have been allowed to compete for quite a long time at the Olympic level. If the advantages were so heavily existent, why don't they win medals at a rate disproportionate to their participation rate like one would expect? Personally, I am only for participation if the sport is regulated by a governing body that has guidelines and standards. There will be some people who say that identification is sufficient, and to me that is an extreme view, but when it comes to participation in sport, for your own identification purposes, I'm fine with that. One needs to be on the appropriate therapy for a sufficient amount of time. I think you deserve a delta. I didn't know this. I'm no sports expert, but I am a trans woman and am friends with many other trans women. While we do still have some general advantages like skeletal structure differences, HRT blockers themselves cause a massive loss in overall strength. There's an ongoing sort of meme in a lot of trans communities that you know you've reached it when you need to ask for help to open a pickle jar. In my case at least, this was incredibly true. Pre-HRT I was built like a damn linebacker, never worked out but could naturally bench an easy 250 pounds like it was nothing. 7 months into HRT, if I skip the gym for a week my muscles can barely operate at an embarrassing level. Like, tearing packages for food gets hard. I have to constantly work every muscle just to keep what's left of them. That said, everybody's body is different. Edit, since some people don't seem to understand what a hyperbole is, here ya go lads. Hyperbole, learn to pronounce noun exaggerated statements or claims not meant to be taken literally. He vowed revenge with O's and hyperboles. Also, sorry mods, I'll stop feeding the trolls starting now. It's anecdotal evidence, but I have a co-worker who is male to female transgender. She's currently in her late 40s and only started transitioning a couple of years ago. She has mentioned more than once that she's noticed losing a lot of muscle strength, particularly this past year when she said the hormones seemed to be making more of a difference than in the beginning. She still has reached, she's close to 6 and I'm 5 feet 1 inches a fab. I have slightly more arm strength than most women I know and we found I can lift more than she can. She also had to ask me to open a jar for her. I would argue you gave away the delta too quickly. My reply to that was this: Fallon Fox is simultaneously a bad example and a good example. She was not talented, but was able to get farther than she otherwise would have because of her physical advantages. But when a talented transgender athlete shows up, carrying all the male advantages into the female ranks, the other women are going to not have a chance. Male sex characteristics just carry far too much advantage. If you want an example of a sport where these advantages are readily apparent and have been borne out, look at powerlifting. Transgender athletes are breaking records with relative ease in the female ranks there. And this should not be surprising. Look at the differences between the record male and female bench presses for weight class. And those are women who, I promise you, are taking steroids. If they were natural and that good, they could go on steroids and become a phenomenon in their chosen profession. You really think they wouldn't do that, Dart? That being said, what do you say to the fact that estrogen hardens your bones during hormone transition treatment? What do you say towards the fact that muscle development is unfairly in favor of genetic make genealogy? Fox broke a woman's skull. It's very possible that these blows will be stronger. The fact that Evans was able to beat Fox with her technical skill doesn't prove the fact that the strength advantage makes it an unfair opposition. I'm all in favor of someone living their life in a way that makes them happy. That's not what's being debated here. The issue at hand is the difference between genetic male and female body compositions. If this didn't matter, then why separate male and female sports at all? That fact that we do shows a sociological understanding of the facts. Our bodies are developed differently. Our bodies have different chemical makeups which allow for easier muscle growth in males. Look at the high school post-transition girls running track. The girls' genetic girl squad is unable to match the male counterpart. Those girls who were born as such lost opportunities for scholarships over the fact that they were running against individuals who were born male and have testosterone in their chemical makeup. To be fair, he left out the fact that Fallon is the only person in the history of women's MMA to ever fracture someone's skull during a competition. She had explosive power, but nothing else. No takedown or grappling defense, as they planned on making their MMA career off their raw strength lending to powerful striking, which did not work out since women's MMA was evolving quickly and the one-trick ponies were on their way out, similar to what had happened in men's MMA a decade before. No dude, that's flat out misleading. Fallon Fox gave her opponent an orbital fracture. It's next to breaking someone's nose with how common it is. It's happened to plenty of women in MMA. Edit, I do recall an Australian woman who's actually given 5 orbital fractures to various opponents, apparently, and broken someone's pelvis in her fights.